Welcome, everybody. This is our final webinar in our winter series, and today talking about succession planning. It feels like this is absolutely not a new topic, but it certainly is one that is much more topical in recent months. We're going to be delving into the details of how to approach this really difficult subject of succession planning, and then talk about some tools and services available to help you make a plan that hopefully works for your family. I'll introduce our experts in a second, but we're essentially addressing concerns, including when to start succession planning discussions, how to handle financial situations. It's interesting because this topic really feels like it's a topic of two halves, right? There is this quite emotional side to having these sorts of conversations, particularly with your family, but there is an absolute need to understand and approach the sort of legalities and the practicalities necessary to secure your future. So we're really hoping to kind of bring these two different sides of this topic together in this next hour. So thank you everyone for joining us. So first I will introduce today's speakers. So please meet Becky Miles. She is a senior partner at Real Success. Born on a small dairy farm in North Devon, Becky has worked in agriculture since studying at Harper Adams. From grain trading, marketing Lurpak butter, co-managing a mixed farm in southwest Portugal, to HDB dairy, her career has been quite varied. As well as working at Real Success, Becky is a CEO for the charity called Let's Farm Foundation and is a co-director at Lean Farming UK. And we are also joined by Julie Robinson, who is a partner with Roythornes Solicitors. With previous experience at National Farmers Union and the National Trust, Julie's work is very much focused on land-based businesses, especially farmers. Julie is named as a Legal 500 leading individual in agriculture and estates law, and typically advises on landlord-tenant relationships, farming joint ventures and collaborations, as well as natural capital opportunities for farmers and landowners, and farming subsidies and environmental schemes. Very impressive description, both you ladies. Thank you so much for joining us. And I'm Linda, I'm your host. I'm head of membership here at TIAH. So with that, I think we're ready to begin. So I will hand over to you, Becky.
Lovely. Thank you very much, Linda, and welcome everybody. Thank you for joining us this evening. So what I'm going to cover this evening is more of the emotional side of how to approach succession planning. So we'll talk about what is a succession plan, why we need one, when to start, who needs to be involved, etc. And when insult your intelligence by reading the screen, you can see what it says. So we can move on to the next slide. So my journey in succession planning, so I don't have a farm, although my parents had one when I was small. They sold it, and I was unaware that succession planning was a thing until I worked for HDB Dairy, where I was a knowledge exchange manager and was delivering meetings and other things for farmers. One of my presenters was Sian Bushell, who is a fantastic lady, was one of the instigators of being a facilitator, delivering succession planning to farmers. And it was a complete light bulb moment for me when I heard her present. And I was so inspired by her because I could see there was such a need in farming for this that I attended her training session. And I'm so glad I did. And the first thing I did following that training was to sit down with my mum, even though we don't have a farm, and sort out what needed to be planned ahead. And we actually use the Age UK format. It's a really easy step-by-step guide to just checking what she really wanted to happen. And she was a little taken aback when I first asked her if she'd do this with me. And the first question she asked me was, Becky, do you think I'm going to die? Well, I think we all know that at some time we are going to pass away. We don't know when. And it's the kindest thing for our families and loved ones to have a plan so that they can grieve when the time comes and not be in a panic as to where's the bank accounts, where's the passwords and all these sort of things. So we did that with Mum, and I'm so glad we did, because she now has Alzheimer's, and I know that we're doing everything that she wanted to happen is now happening. So since I've been trained 6 years now through Real Success, delivering succession planning for farmers, and I'm also a custodian of the recently put together Succession Alliance. So we're a group of succession planning facilitators spread right across the country, and we've joined together to make it easier for farmers to find someone to support them with that process if they find that that's something they need. So we have a website if you want to go and have a look at it. It's there to be used. Okay, next slide. So what is a succession plan? It's the route to agreeing the transfer of farm business and assets in order to achieve personal, family and business goals. So I think everyone knows the high level, yes, it's for the farm business and it's about the assets. But the most important thing is it does achieve those goals for everyone involved, and therefore will deliver the business goals. And that sometimes gets forgotten. I think people worry about the assets and who's going to get what, but it's more important about the personal goals that will lead then to the business goals. Okay, next slide. So we're going to do a quick poll now just to find out who we've got in the audience tonight and what your current situation is. So it's just going to come on screen now. So when you can see it, please can you select what is your current situation, succession situation. So there's a few options. Do you have no farm to pass on? You've got a farm but no successors and no plan. Got a farm, no successors but do have a plan. You have a farm to pass on but no plan. A farm to pass on, you have a succession plan. You have a farm to pass on, you have a plan but need to review it due to the new IHT tax regulations coming in. So please select the one that's relevant to you and just give us a guide as to who we've got on this evening's meeting, what the situation is.
I can't see the results. I'm going to ask my
Well, let's take the
to
guides.
see if he can share the the responses. There's definitely some responses coming through, so
that's good.
So yeah, we've got approximately 64% of those attending said that they have no farm to pass on. Well, actually 36% have voted that they do have a farm to pass on, but not yet got a plan sorted. Oh.
Okay. That's great to know. Thank you, everybody.
Can I just say, if anything about the poll is still on your screen, just click the little X and it'll disappear so that you're not blocked seeing the rest of the slides. I know sometimes it sort of gets a bit stuck, so if you can shut that down yourselves. I will switch slides. There we go.
Lovely, thank you. So why do we need this succession plan? So 34% of you might be interested in this. So primarily it's security, security for the family and security if you have staff, because even if they don't talk to you about their concerns, that is there a plan and what's going to happen if somebody passes away, they will be thinking about it because they need to have security. Your bank will be very interested to know that you have a succession plan, and it will help them when they are working with you, whether there are loans or other products that you have with them. They need to know that there's a plan. Your suppliers, customers, etc. It's also useful for them to know, because who's next in line, who are they going to be working with next? It's so important. And a plan is a plan with agreed stages. It doesn't happen overnight. So we agree what the steps will be, who will start to take on responsibility, and then review as you go forward. It can and should be reviewed because things can change. So as soon as there is a change, check your plan. Is it still relevant? And then agree if it needs any amendments going forwards. Okay, next slide, please. When should we start? That's a question I often get asked, and I say, if you haven't already started, then now is the best time. It's like planting a tree. If you haven't started, start now. We need to get our own affairs in order. That's the least we can do, isn't it? And there's a resource on the TIAH website, on the learning platform under succession planning, for getting your own affairs in order. And that's looking at wills and powers of attorney and what do you want to happen if the worst happens to you or you're in a coma. Please give your family an indication as what you would like to happen, because they're going to be in deep trauma, and to ask them to make those sort of decisions isn't fair. So there's a really good resource there to help get you started. When to do it? As soon as you get married or you're in a long-term relationship, that's a good time to start. And as I say, the basic items for a succession plan are on the TIAH website in the learning module. You make the decisions that are important to you. And crucially, if you have children, please formally state who you want to have as guardians if the worst should happen to you. You need to ask them, obviously, if they're prepared to be guardians, but then name them so that that can happen. Otherwise, the state will decide. And if you're happy with them making that decision, that's fine. If not, get your house in order. Okay, next slide. Oh, we're very grateful to 3 families that have been filmed to talk about what their succession journey. So we have the Holmes family from Dorset, the Homer family from Wiltshire, and Catherine Pickford and her nephew Nathan from Somerset. So we're going to play that clip for you now.
The main driver for getting the family around the table to talk around succession was really to not mess it up, I guess. The family had seen over the years a number of examples where other farming businesses hadn't done a great job of its succession and had ended up falling out through the process. And really the aim was to end up with a successful business in 30 years' time, as well as allowing each member of the family to achieve their goals.
The succession planning is probably the most important thing people need to know, especially the younger generation needs to know what their succession is from the older generation, and the older generation needs to give up, basically, and hand over. There are too many farmers that carry on and aren't allowed the checkbook until it's too late.
Farmers should retire, and that then makes space for the next generation. So the people in their 30s, it's their time to be farming, to be getting involved in the business. I'm 65 and I need to let these guys get on with it.
So the initial conversations were really just around the dinner table. I was still living at home at that point. We would chat about it in the evenings and decided it was a sensible thing to do.
We said as part of planning for succession that we needed to grow the business to ensure that there was a livelihood for more family members to be involved. So together we all grew the business. It's something that we've always naturally talked about and been open and transparent about. It's just natural for us to communicate with each other and be transparent. My family were very open about talking about each other's aspirations and ambitions in life, and we've done the same here. We've never assumed or taken them for granted that they would become farmers and want to be part of the business. It's just naturally evolved.
I felt it was really important that we did have an outside person to advise us on how to go about this and do it in a structured way.
It wasn't just about the farm, it was also about the family and about how the family would operate within the farming structure as well. Family time needed to be separate from farming time. It's like we needed to enjoy both elements of it.
We've used an independent advisor every time we sort of have a chat to make sure that we're both going to get what we both want out of it.
It ensures that both parties are heard.
The succession has changed somewhat over the years,
yeah,
hasn't it? You've been buying cows.
Yeah. It's just being continually updating, because people's goals can change and you've just got to be honest with each other.
Facilitators helped us move things forward and point out some timelines. So there's 2 elements to the facilitators that we've used, and one has been our accountant, but then the other element has been the facilitation of, well, never mind all the business side of it and the financial side of it, what about the personal side of it?
That really helped. It helped us to communicate better together as a family, and it also helped us to be able to communicate with our staff. And that's an important part of it, is being then be able to communicate to the staff so they know what's going on, because we couldn't farm what we farm without our team.
To see the next generation taking the business forward and growing the business and managing it so well on a day-to-day basis, it's incredibly rewarding.
I'm in a very lucky situation where, well, one, we're a pretty open family and we're willing to talk about this stuff, but also we've got parents that they also see the benefits of talking about succession planning. It's like, but I think it's much more difficult when you've got a party that doesn't want to be in the room, if you see what I mean. But all you can do is just keep trying to coax them into it and maybe try and show them an example of where it's gone wrong or something like that.
With these changes in the inheritance tax rules, I think succession planning is even more important than it ever was, just leaving it until the oldest generation passes away is certainly not where you should be going now. So therefore you need to plan it. If you want your sons and daughters who are in your farm business to be motivated, you need to work with them and understand their needs and understand how that will work in terms of succession.
Just because you haven't got no immediate succession, there's various options, contract farming, tenancies, to get the younger generation or people outside the industry into the industry.
We're feeling fairly positive at the moment about the succession and going forward. With farming in general, I think with dairy farming, we're in a good position now. We've got everything settled here. So hopefully we can take it going forward. It can continue being a profitable business.
If any farming families are sort of worried about stepping on eggshells and causing upset and so on, you've just got to embrace it, and you've got to communicate and talk to each other. And it's not a subject for tomorrow, it's a subject for today.
There you go.
Lovely. Thank you. We're very grateful to those farmers for sharing their messages around succession planning. So who needs to be involved? And they gave us a bit of an insight as to who needs to be involved in agreeing the succession plan. The whole family. And I encourage you to include the partners of family members as well, because if you only have the family around the table to discuss the plans going forward, and then they go home and tell their partner, you're likely to get a feedback of, well, I don't agree with that. And why did you say that? That's not going to work. It's much easier to get everybody that's involved all together around the table to get things moving. Then you know you've got a path and it's going to take place. Okay. Also, anyone else who's due to inherit, if they're not a family member, there may be a situation where there's somebody outside the family who needs to be there as well. And on occasion, other professionals, and when appropriate. So your accountant, solicitor, farm advisor, whoever is appropriate at the time and the family agree to them being there, that's the time that they should be included. Okay, next slide.
Hello, Becky. Hello, Becky. Hello, everybody. Julie here. Can I just jump in there, just on the involvement of professionals? My ears pricked up.
Yeah.
Do you? I mean, this is a sort of it's a bit chicken and egg, really, because it's difficult to make those plans without necessarily knowing that you might be going down a route that is going to land you with a ginormous tax bill or capital gains tax bill if you're going to transfer land, or even when it's not clear who owns, who in particular owns properties, etc. So I think maybe particularly given the acceleration of succession planning following the budget at the end of October, it's probably quite a good idea. But I would say that, but because I'm one of the professionals, but to bring in the professionals, or at least touch base with them and let them know what you're doing. So fairly early on in that process, although I completely agree with you that the consensus among family members is critical.
Yeah, usually the first step. Yeah, thank you, Juliet. Really appropriate. Thank you. Okay, so how do we get started when we get the family together? So to get started, go slowly, okay? And with empathy for each person involved. Everyone's got a history and may have positive or negative experiences in the past with them, but be respectful and see their point of view. Everyone in their head has got an idea of what should be happening going forwards. It's allowing everyone to express their thoughts, and let's hear everybody. Sometimes when I get involved in facilitating meetings, sometimes it's the first time that person has been heard, because you can have some quite dominant people in families sometimes. So ensure everybody gets the opportunity to share. Be respectful, acknowledge everyone's difference, and we want to do it with love because it's our family and it's really important. Okay, next slide, please. So once you decide you're ready to start succession planning, you might want to do it by yourselves and run your own meeting, or you might want to bring in an external person. As I said, there's resources on the learning module on the TIAH website to support you in running it yourself. So how to run the meeting and some top tips, and understand the difference between chairing a meeting and facilitating a meeting. I would suggest with succession planning, we need to facilitate the meeting and make it easy for everyone to express their thoughts and ideas. Chairing can become a little bit dictatorial and may block some people from sharing. So beware a dominant person taking over. And if you decide you want to bring an outside facilitator or mediator, as I said, there's the Succession Alliance port of call, or you can Google. But we try Googling and it's quite hard to find somebody. Okay, so good luck.
Becky, can I just ask though, that in terms of if you decide to run your own meeting, I mean, how do you decide who is going to be facilitating it? Is it just a bit of whoever is most dominant or whoever is most interested, or how does that generally play out?
Well, everyone needs to agree. That's the most important thing. And there may be two of you that would like to do it. Take turns. That's not a problem, as far as I can see. Everyone's just got to agree, and then we can move forward, and then you can carry on. But make sure everyone agrees who it's going to be and why they've been chosen. Get someone to take notes. Maybe take turns during the meeting to take notes, because if you're taking notes, it's quite hard to listen as well. You just want the headline points so that you don't forget what was said and who said it and why they said it, and what you agreed. And when I'm running a meeting, by the end, we generally takes most of the day to chew the fat and come to some conclusions and some ideas. We'll reach some agreed points at the end, and there'll be some action points. So we'll delegate the action points to various members of the family to go and speak to people like Julie if we want to check the tax point of view, and are we making a big mistake? Is this actually workable? Do we need to restructure the business for this to happen? Might need to talk to a solicitor. But everyone's got a task at the end, and they're going to feed back to the family within an agreed period, so that the ball keeps rolling. It doesn't just get left, because there's nothing more frustrating.
Yeah, I can imagine. So we have another poll.
Oh, there we go. So we're moving on to the communication levels within your family. So it'd be great to know, does your family all get on and do you talk to each other? Do some of the family communicate, but at least two members do not? Or none of the family communicate with each other, or you don't have any family members? Just to give us an idea of what the situation is out there with you guys.
And this is outside of succession, right? So this is just communication about anything and everything.
Yeah.
So we've got people.
Families are complicated.
Families are complicated.
They really are.
You're not wrong about that.
And they're all different. Every situation's different.
Yeah.
And they've all got a history.
Yeah.
There's things we don't talk about. We don't go there for whatever reason.
It does seem like we've got a fairly even split between either the family get on and talk to each other, or some of the family communicate and others do not. It's almost a 50-50 split with the responses we're getting.
Interesting. Thanks, everybody. I'm going to click on my cross so I can clear my screen.
Thank you.
Please do the same so you can see what's coming next.
Yeah.
So how can we tackle poor communication? So I mentioned it before, but we need to understand and acknowledge each other's perspective. We've all got a history, and there'll be reasons why there's been barriers put in place or why we don't talk about certain topics. I encourage you to use, when you're communicating or trying to communicate, use open questions. So start your question with who, when, why, what, or how, because then the person that's responding has got to give you a longer answer. A closed question is, do you agree with me, for example, is a yes/no answer, and that doesn't really give you a lot of information. But if you ask those open questions, they're going to give you a bit more, and that helps you keep the conversation moving. Keep the conversations around succession short to start with, because there's a lot of change potentially with succession, and people need to go away and reflect and think about what the options are, and then you can come back and say, oh, remember last time we spoke you mentioned whatever it was. What are your thoughts now? How are you feeling? How can I help you? Because if people have got barriers and they go, I can't see how we're going to get over this hurdle with Uncle Joe, or keeping the cows or not keeping the cows, whatever the situation is. And then always appreciate everyone chipping in and sharing their view. Be grateful. Okay?
And I guess to that same point, it's probably okay to call somebody out if actually they aren't being respectful. So in terms of, you can appreciate someone's comments, but you can probably also say that actually that wasn't a helpful thing that you just said.
Yes. And how do you think it makes the rest of us feel? And this is for the whole family, and it's for the business. We want to protect it.
Yeah. Yeah.
So it's for everyone to engage fully. Yeah. So understanding how personality can affect our reactions. So there's lots of tools out there. The example we've got on the TIAH website is the DISC profile. So basically, we all have 4 profile types. And on the DISC one, they call it conscientious, dominance, steadiness, and influence. So if we move on to the next slide. So people that have a higher score for dominance can come across to others as loud, possibly aggressive. They might talk in bullet points and talk about let's crack on and this is direction of travel, and don't give a lot of detail. People that are more conscientious, they require more clarity, they want more information, and when they send you an email or write things down, it can appear as an essay rather than compared to the dominance personality where it would be very short, brief sentences. People that come under the steadiness profile are very caring and they don't want to rock the boat. And they can come across as hesitant because they don't want to upset the family. So they might not want to make a decision just because the status quo is an easiest place to be. But sometimes we do have to rock the boat to make progress. So they just need support and going through the journey. And then the last profile is influence, and they are open to ideas, open to change, and will really engage with it because they love variety. So generally, we'll lead with 2 of those, and some people can be very level and just be an even score across them all. So very steady, easygoing. So you might be able to pick out what your profile is from that, which 2 you lead with, and maybe what your family are. Okay. And again, there's more information on the TIAH website relating to the profiles to help you with that. Okay, next slide, please. So this is a diagram of the change curve, and it doesn't matter what change we put in place, the curve will always be the same. We start at a status quo, number 1, we're chugging along quite easily, and then someone has the temerity to suggest, I think we're going to need to talk about succession planning. And that leads us into stage 2, where we have disruption and fear. We start with shock and denial because somebody mentions it. That takes us into disruption. People can feel angry, fearful. A whole range of emotions are boiling over. We start to come out of it, where we explore the ideas, and we start talking about things more and what actually it could mean. And that brings more acceptance. And by the end of it, we're rebuilding. We've got the commitment, the family are on board. And we take and look, we're in a better place than we were before. Okay. Next slide, please. So support and next steps. So if you want to find, you may decide you want to have an independent facilitator support you. As I said, you can try the Succession Alliance. If you've got financial matters to sort out, even maybe before you get the family around the table, you'll know better than me. You know your business and your family. Then you need to speak to an accountant, and the same for the legal issues. You need to speak to a solicitor. But there's lots, as I said, lots more information on the TIAH website on the succession learning module.
Lovely. And I think we said in the beginning that this is sort of a tale of 2 halves in terms of a topic that has these emotional connections. But I know, Julie, you were quite keen to bring out some extra considerations from your standpoint and from your expertise. So I will hand over to you if you want to talk through the sort of 4 main bits that you are very keen to make sure that people consider.
Yes, so thank you very much, Linda and Becky. That's very interesting. And I am really not qualified to talk about that emotional side of the succession planning. But I can say something about some of the practicalities that will enable that and help that and facilitate that, which is also important, because the last thing you want to do is be held up from achieving your goals for the business and for succession by practicalities around structures and land ownership. So 4 quick points. First of all, housekeeping. This is tedious, folks. This is tedious, and you're going to have to spend some money. I just want you to think it's not spending, it's investing in order to get where we need to go. So it's actually, I'd like to think of it, and I try and, you know, talk clients around to believing that it's productive spend, because it will enable things to move on to the next generation. So housekeeping is, and I can guarantee it happens, and I can just tell you it happens over and over, week in, week out. Group of family members around me, and I will sit and I'll say, so who owns that piece of land? Ooh, yeah, that's mum. No, it isn't. We both own it. And well, okay. So what about this piece? No, that's in the trust. That's it. So look, it's great fun with clients to do that. But actually, what we really need to know is, okay, well, actually, who does own? Who is going to be transferring this if they are? And it's not just the legal title, it's who has the beneficial interest, where things are in trust or where things are maybe held in the partnership. So one is your land and your leases. Don't forget your leases. Tenant farmers can have succession plans as well. Has your lease term ended on your farm business tenancy and it's rolling on year to year? That's quite an insecure position to be in. So don't forget your leases, folks. But also you want to look at your farm business structures. Is the farm, many farms farm in partnership. There might be a company knocking around somewhere in the mix, but most family farms farm in partnership. And I've had this on the day before yesterday, is that land in the partnership, on the partnership balance sheet? I think it is. Well, last time you said it wasn't. Well, let's check. No, it's not. And the reason that matters is that if you come to do your wills and you put the land into the partnership and it's in your loan capital account in the partnership, you can't leave that piece of land in your will. You're leaving your share in the partnership in your will. So that's why these things matters. And so we gaily go on and say what we want to do, and we can get there. We can make it all happen most of the time, as long as it's not completely unrealistic. We can make it happen. We just need to do that housekeeping. First, housekeeping. Second, tied to it, and post the 30th of October and the budget, every single farm in the country, every single farming business and farming family in the country will need to know, will need to review their position and ask the question as part, it's actually in some ways enabling and helping succession planning, accelerating it, but ask the question, what is my current exposure if X person, you know, if mum died tomorrow, if dad died tomorrow, if son died tomorrow, if daughter, you know, what is the exposure, and how can we mitigate against getting a tax bill that we can avoid if we plan? So every farm will need to review. You may even need to have valuations to know what value. So yet more professionals, yet more money being spent. But it's always really good to know what things are worth, how much is at stake. You know, whether it's worth bothering about X, Y, Z little point in the deal that is negotiated and reached. And I could tell I'm already using more legalistic language like negotiating instead of consensual language. But 3, protecting assets. Think about if you're transferring those assets earlier than you expected, maybe to a younger a couple. To younger people than you would have done had we not had the changes on the 30th of October, or even generally protect those assets, maybe from a marriage partner or a civil partnership partner, or if something goes terribly wrong, how do we protect assets? Think about prenuptial agreements before you enter into a marriage, post-nuptial agreements, maybe stuff going into trust rather than just into the hands of someone who'll just go and gamble it away in Paris casinos. So just protect the assets. And then the 4th point is just to bear in mind, and Becky's touched on this, and certainly the farmers in the video did, but that distinction between the business, the farm business, who's milking the cows, who's operating, who's doing the costings, the farming business itself, and the underlying assets, whether that's tenanted land or farmland. They can be completely separated and everyone can still have something out of it. So just bear that in mind as part of your succession planning. Thank you, Linda. Back to you.
Thank you. I've just put a thing in the Q&A just to encourage people to add any questions that they have, because we've actually reached the end of the sort of formal presentation, so I will stop sharing my screen now. But as you know, we did have some questions sort of prepared that we thought we would actually just sort of just keep this conversation going, because I do think it's so topical, and as I say, there's so many different angles to come at it. So just to sort of kick off, I guess the obvious question is what happens if you have no succession plan? Becky, I mean, I know we've sort of already talked about this, but if you don't have one, what do you do?
Chaos. That's quite simple. No plan. What do you expect to happen? You know, if the worst happens and there's no plan, nobody knows what to do. They're potentially grieving because somebody's passed away. They can't find the passwords. They can't access the bank account. They can't pay the bills. It's just awful situation. And we've all, I'm sure Julie as well, has seen these situations. It's terrible. And nobody wants to leave that sort of legacy for their family. So please, please, please be inspired this evening to start succession planning and put your house in order. And it's good for the business, because it's generally a review of actually what's going well and who really wants to be involved going forwards, because we're very good at making assumptions and they're not always the right thing, and we've got it wrong. Yeah. Actually, Joe doesn't want to be involved and we thought he did. So we need to make a plan.
Yeah. Which actually raises the next question. What if you don't have a farming successor? Then what?
Well, let me tell you, there are a lot of new entrants that are gasping for an opportunity. So you could have a joint venture, you could contract farm, you could bring someone in to start taking over from you, and there's all sorts of profit share arrangements. The world is your oyster. What we do not want to lose, all that knowledge that you've got from farming that farm. Why not pass it on to somebody else and give them a chance? Yeah. Please consider that as an option.
So I guess it is that thing of looking beyond your family. If your family members actually aren't the right people or aren't interested, you know, you probably do employ others, etc. So that is probably a way.
And even if your family aren't interested now or aren't old enough, give somebody an opportunity for 5 or 10 years, and then your family can change their mind. That's absolutely fine. But in that interim, you've given someone else the opportunity to get the experience, and then they can go and take on their own tenancy or buy their own farm.
Yeah. And then I guess there's another scenario of if you are actually in line to be the successor, but you don't want to, what do you do? And that's and I guess that's part of this conversation, isn't it? That you have to be honest with where you're at.
You must be honest. It's not fair otherwise. Sorry, Julie, you want to come in, don't you? I can see you.
Yes, I was coming in on the question about if there's no farming successor.
Okay.
I think we had a whole event on this. Help. Get me out of here, kids, but no farming successors. And I have, one case that I've worked on, not just one, but one particular case in mind where we had kids, but they had other jobs and wanted other careers. But next door neighbours, there was the next generation in place who it was a smaller farm, and he wanted he was aspirational, and ours was the bigger farm. And so actually we did do a joint venture where he had the opportunity to manage the whole operation, and we rolled up the kit and the people. It was quite a big restructuring, but actually it meant that we, the Wrinkleys, we're able to take a step back from that stressful, crop sales and what's my margin this year, and see and help transition that next door neighbouring farmer into the business. And actually they're part of our business as well now. It's gone very, very well, and that next gen gets an opportunity to stay around and farm a bigger farm. And there are, as Becky said, there are structures to do that. But the second point is, it may be that you actually decide to sell up. Why? Because it may be that you decide that market prices, are still pretty firm, that actually that money could go into other ventures of the kids that you have, into other things that they want to do, and that your farming experience has come to an end. So we mustn't think of that as failure. That really isn't failure. That is part of succession planning, and helping people achieve their goals.
Yeah, it's a very good point. And then what if we have a scenario where somebody has been working hard on the farm for several years, but don't know if they're going to inherit it? What does that individual do?
They need to ask, they need to find out. It's really not fair to not let your family know what the plan is. And I've been in situations where people are working on hope. We hope we're going to inherit. They don't know. Now, who else would do that in any other industry? Carry on a career not knowing if they were going to be taking it forward in the future? It's so unfair. It's cruel. It's emotional blackmail. I'm not for it. You can tell.
So just to come in here, at the beginning, I talked about those productive costs and expenses and investment that you make in getting things sorted out. When we have these claims, and you read about them every couple of weeks in Farmers Weekly, they're big claims, land is worth a lot of money, where someone feels that they have, and, there's a legal basis to the claim where you've been promised the farm, and where you have relied on that promise and where you've lost out because of it, maybe another opportunity. These technically proprietary estoppel claims, but they're very sad cases because all of that money that you have to spend to sort it out, it's not productive spend. It's negative. It's spend in a stressful situation. So coming back to Becky's involve everybody and that transparency of discussions does help to avoid this situation. We're not going to avoid it in every case because disputes happen, people fall out, etc. But the aim is to try to have transparency early on and review plans all the way through so that we don't end up with these really sad claims.
Very sad, and it's really not fair for the older generation just to tell them the next generation you'll be all right. What does that mean? What does that really mean? Be open and fair.
We've had a question come through now just on costs, which was costs often put people off, as you've mentioned. So how do succession alliance and other solicitor costs, how are they worked out? As of course, you have to charge for your work, but how are those costs decided?
Yep. So we're all individuals within the Succession Alliance. We don't have a flat rate. We've just all come together because we all are facilitators to help people find us. We all have our own bandwidths of what we charge. The first thing to do is pick up the phone and have a conversation and find out if that person is something you think could work with your family, number one. Otherwise, it's a very short phone call. Thank you very much. Goodbye. And then we talk, and it also depends on the situation. How complicated? Do I need to come and meet all the family individually to find or speak to them on a Teams call or whatever to find out how they're feeling, whether I feel I can work with them before we maybe get everybody in the room. So it does depend on the situation, but I can tell you it's a lot cheaper than not doing it. And I think Julie probably say the same.
I think in terms of solicitors, accountants, valuers, we have codes that we're governed by and regulated by. We have to let give you estimates and give you an idea of how much something is going to cost for different stages. And some of our hourly rates do look expensive. If you look at somebody's hourly rate of £250 or £350, you think, I don't even make that in a week. But we have to give you that information. And coming back to housekeeping, there's quite a lot, and I always just say to my clients, if you sort through that pile of either you can or I can. If you sort through it, then and put them into order, or take out the duplicates, or put them into piles for what they're about, then that makes my job easier. And then I say to them, how long did it take you? And so that everybody knows that this stuff just takes forever. It's once you get into really getting it right, it does take a bit of time. So I always just try and let clients do as much of the work as they can do without needing that professional input, if that's what they want to do to help keep costs bill down.
And I guess it's just weighing up the benefit, because obviously farmers are busy people, so to sit and troll through all these it's a tricky one, isn't it? Somebody else just put in the chat, do you think the lack of succession planning is leading to an increase in farming divorces in the next generation down? I don't know if either of you have an opinion on that.
I've only had one recently, but it's
not a trend that you're seeing.
Not a trend, no.
Okay.
Maybe
Good.
I'm looking in the wrong circles.
No, it's not something I'm seeing, but good. I think it comes back to Becky's point about involving as many different people in the family. And also, I just want to make the point that succession, if you go and read Farmers Weekly articles from 1950s, you will read about, how do I get my dad to hand over the checkbook? He's 96, I'm 60 and he still hasn't let me sign a check. It's not a new problem. It's not a new problem.
No.
Yeah. Okay. Speaking of not a new problem, we've got another question, which is essentially the farm is not making any money. So how can I tell the next generation what to expect or who to expect to farm?
So again, it was the same situation as we had the question earlier about, I'm not sure if I want to farm. You need to be honest with the family, because if they think they're going to be involved in the business going forwards and it's not actually viable, you need to be honest with them. And they may have ideas as to how to help turn it round. You don't need to carry it all yourself, that burden. So please be open and share. It'll be a difficult conversation, but you'll feel better for sharing it.
Yeah. It's interesting. I actually sat in a panel session at LAMA, and there was a session on succession planning there as well. And there was some interesting conversations there where it's just, I think maybe as the next generation is coming into farm ownership, whether succession planning will become less emotive. I know we've just sort of said this isn't a new topic, but I do wonder if perhaps it is starting to change, if it becomes more normalized. And I'm even wondering, do we need to be changing the language of succession planning, which feels very specific as like a family problem, but actually talk about it more being business resilience to attract other people who you were saying in terms of, if you don't have a family successor, does it make more sense to talk about business resilience so you attract other kind of people?
Yeah, it could be. And look at any other industry. They all have succession plans. If they've got staff, that's why you've got a tier of management and responsibility, so that if somebody leaves, you've got somebody coming in behind, which we tend not to be very good at in farming. We're getting better.
Yeah. Maybe it is a culture shift sort of in the future. Who knows? Maybe sort of a naive question, and I suspect, Julie, this will be one for you, but is there any need to pass your farm as inheritance? Like, wouldn't the next generation potentially be promoted as directors with controlling shares and continue running it as a business? Again, I don't have the legal background, so.
Yes, I mean, that's a very interesting question, isn't it? Because if let's just say that the farm business and indeed the land or some of the land is in a company, that is succession planning, Linda, and everybody. Somebody has to decide that they're going to be given the controlling shares or that they're going to be made a director. That is exactly what may come out of the discussions that Becky facilitates, whether it's, company directorships, whether it's becoming a partner, actually starting to pay into the partnership and take more than a fixed salary out of the partnership, etc. So that is exactly part of I think what probably, I don't know what your background is, Linda. That's a question I would expect from the corporate world, where businesses tend to be wrapped up in companies.
Yeah.
Whereas actually farm businesses, there are companies around, but are often family, individual sort of traders or partnerships.
Yeah, it does. It definitely feels more complicated than any other sector I've ever worked in. So it's really interesting to hear about this. We've had another question come through just around, how do you handle situations where family members have conflicting visions for the farm's future?
I recommend bringing somebody independent in to mediate that discussion, because that can help take the heat out, because you get to a level, you're not going to make any progress. And diplomacy, bring somebody in to mediate if you can. Somebody you trust. It doesn't have to be a facilitator, somebody you mutually agree that can come in and talk with you.
And what's interesting here is, if you try and fit a square peg into a round hole, if you try and divide the livestock and the arable up into, between two siblings, actually what you may end up doing, and what I'm starting to do more of, is the splitting of the business after a little while from that succession point, because actually it's not that there are tensions, it's just that each wants to be able to take, their bit of the business, or do something different in life, or take the business in their own direction. And so it's just making sure that actually everyone really is content with that ultimate solution that you find. Otherwise you'll end up unraveling it, which is money for us. Don't pay us money if you can avoid it.
We don't want the work.
I think you might do. Okay. The other thing, again, probably coming from the sort of corporate world, just in terms of, does it make a difference? Like, so limited companies don't pay inheritance tax. So I understand that a lot of farmers are sort of sole traders. So do you move away from that and then become a limited company? Does that make a difference?
So that's another interesting question, Linda. I mean, it's interesting because it's a discussion that we're having post the budget, and whether there may be some scope for putting the farm business into a company and the land into a company. A couple of points. Shares in a company are part of your estate, and you pay inheritance tax on them if they're in your estate, just as livestock are. The only way not to pay inheritance tax is to have given it all away, or to have spent it all doing good, fun stuff. If you spend it buying something, that thing you bought is in your estate as well. So we are having that discussion with colleagues who are tax. I'm not a tax lawyer, but with clients. That's one option on the table. And the other point about shares in companies is, post-budget, you may want to see quite a lot of shareholders, so that everybody's share and the value of everybody's share is reduced below the threshold of 1 million. And other stuff they have will have to be taken into account. The difficulty with that is if you start to have too fragmented a shareholding in what is essentially a farming business, you will then struggle with control and decision making, just the same way as if you had 33 people sitting around a table. And so you need careful structuring of the share structures, directorships, shareholder agreements around voting, etc. Again, all good money for the professionals, but it's about making it work.
So we've had a follow-up question to the question around cost charges, just hoping for a little bit more transparency. So it's quite a long one, so bear with me. So, for example, do you typically charge for an initial meeting? And if so, what would this likely to be? Which I suspect is going to be, it depends, but we'll come back to you. And then if it is agreed to continue, do you offer a daily rate coupled with an estimate of the time it might take? This would give your client a good idea of the total costs, which may be the key given farmers' cash flow problems, obviously exacerbated by the unexpected loss of BPS.
Yeah, as soon as you pick up the phone to me, I'm not charging. The first call is free, and if I need to speak to family members, as long as people aren't taking the mick and I'm spending hours and hours and hours on phone calls, then it's free until I get in front of you. There's not a charge, and we'll agree a charge before I come, because is it going to be half a day, a full day? What are we trying to cover? So I'm completely open and transparent before, because I need to know, and I want an agreement in writing on an email or a letter saying, yep, that's fine, let's carry on, we'll meet you such and such a date, blah blah. So completely open and honest. Can't give you figures because every situation's different.
I can only say that I can speak for myself, and it's some and some really. Generally, I would, with a new client, I would have a preliminary meeting where I get to know them and find out about the farm. And however, if that preliminary meeting is 3 hours long, and in that time I've given quite a lot of advice on the basis of documents that I've got in front of me, that's what pays my bills as well. So it'd be some and some. I think the key thing for clients is just trying to give an idea at the front, going, look, this this restructuring is going to be 10 to 15,000 potentially, you know, with sort of land registry, or, you know, or whatever. It might be that, it might not, it might be a couple of grand, you know, it might be 1,500. You know, I can do share farming agreements to bring in, you know, the next door farm or whatever at maybe £1,500 if all the work has been done by the client. I've got all the figures and the information, the land numbers, etc. So it's some and some, and it's difficult. I know it's difficult for farmers to sort of cope with that level of uncertainty.
But I guess it's a thing of don't be afraid to pick up the phone to find out, because I think the initial thing is that first phone call is not going to suddenly, you know, you're not going to get a bill for £1,000 just because you picked up the phone. So I think, the message is please ask for help if you need it.
Yes.
Yeah, definitely. Just a final couple of questions, because we're getting close to 6 o'clock. So I guess, and I think Julie, you'll probably agree with this, but in terms of planning and budgeting for succession, should that be an expectation for tenders and bank loans, or is it already?
I would be really surprised if there weren't any questions involved in tenders and bank loans in terms of in terms of risk management. I mean, I put it as a risk management point. It's about having insurance. It's about having the prenup, etc. I'd be very surprised if banks weren't interested in the whole business and risk management.
Okay, great. And just a final thought, and Becky, this one might be more for you, but just in terms of the next generation coming up, do you think succession planning is understood enough, and is it actually, should we be potentially having more further education around this sort of topic?
Definitely more information, and it needs to become less taboo. It is becoming less taboo, and as we iterated earlier, this the whole changes in IHT have meant that it's being talked about more, which is an unhappy coincidence. Brilliant for the industry. It's going to bring a bit of upheaval, but it will bring everything. Whatever change happens, it always brings opportunity, and that's what we should hang on to. It will bring opportunity for the future. There are people out there keen to farm. If your family don't want to, there are lots of others that do.
I was just going to say that, I mean, I think for any professionals working in farming, it's a special sector, as you've said, Linda. It's very different from the rest of the world out there. And actually, we need our sector. We need the sector to thrive. We want the sector to thrive, and family farms to do well, and farm businesses to do well. So it's really for us to help enable and facilitate, and not take the P. It's not money for old rope when you go and see a lawyer. They want your business to succeed.
Yeah. And I've never come across a family that have regretted putting a succession plan in place.
Yeah, I mean, and that's quite an important message, isn't it? That's great. So we're 1 minute to 6. So I think we'll call it a day. So thank you very much, both of you, for your time. I think we've given our audience, and hopefully anyone watching the recording, a lot to think about, whether they're sort of at the start, middle, or end of their career. It's been really, really useful to just delve into that emotional side and also the practical sides of this sensitive subject. So thank you both so much for your time, and I think we will probably be doing more of these webinars in future. So yes, thank you very much, and I hope you have a lovely evening.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you.